You know, in the Surrey School District, the local Parent Advisory Council has launched a new tracker. We've had a couple of conversations about that already this week. So this is meant to track how often a classroom is cleared because of a student being in crisis. The goal is to shed light on students who may have complex needs that aren't getting the support they need. Well, here's Anne Whitmore with the Surrey District Parent Advisory Council. She spoke to CBC's Early Edition on Wednesday.
Well, usually it's because of safety reasons. So maybe a child is super loud, yelling, crying, screaming, and escalating up to physical activity. So throwing something, throwing an object, or tossing furniture, a number of reasons. And then the toll on mental health. So when you are the responsible adult in the room to keep everyone safe, but also to deliver quality education, and you know that you don't have the resources that need to be in place, it can take quite a toll. We're seeing higher instances of absences and then long-term leaves.
Okay, again, that was Anne Whitmore with the Surrey District Parent Advisory Council. And joining us today to continue the conversation is Tracy Humphreys. Tracy is Director of Operations with the Family Support Institute of BC. So they support families who care for a person with a disability. They also run the Exclusion Tracker. That is an online tool that tracks when students with disabilities are excluded from school environments. Tracy, hi, good afternoon to you.
Hi, Gloria.
I'd like to hear first off just what is your reaction to what you just heard from Anne Whitmore?
I think it's interesting. It's clear that Surrey families and educators as well, it sounds like they've been connected with them, are feeling like there's a big issue and they want to know a little bit more about how often it happens. And that actually is kind of how the Exclusion Tracker got going back in the day. So it's definitely a crisis response to a big issue. At the same time, we have heard just in the last little bit around that tracker a bit of concern from some families about the possibility this might further stigmatize their kids, which is always a worry too.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's our understanding that they want to collect data because data is not being collected right now. How much of a problem do you think these room clearing incidents are? And we talked about Surrey, but in other school districts too.
I think it's a problem, and I think that maybe it isn't quantified, and I think that districts are collecting that data, they're just not sharing it, like the superintendent had said. Usually it's about privacy and it's about the dignity of the student in question. So it's understandable, but I think, that based on the data that we see through the Exclusion Tracker, it's definitely one of the issues, but it's really a symptom of a system under a lot of pressure.
Yes. Okay. I did have a conversation around this, as you pointed out, with Mark Permain, the superintendent of the Surrey School District. Here's some of what he told me in an interview this week about the issue in his district.
There are increased complexities with our students. It's also fair to say that there's increased complexities right now in society, and that's certainly reflected in our schools. I don't know that there's a direct line correlation to what Deepak is suggesting in terms of higher staff absences. That's an interesting perspective, and I guess that's something that we can look into, but it's not something that we've been seeing on a regular basis. We have new kids coming in each year. Some of our students may not be actually designated at this point in time, haven't gone through the process, and so we also try and manage in supporting them, even though the designations or the actual clarity of what supports they need yet. We do provide those supports for them as they enter our school. And once we get clarity on what we actually think they need, we can then drive the resources to them to support them as well.
So again, that was some of my conversation with Mark Permain, the superintendent of the Surrey School District. Tracy, what do you make of his comments?
I think that I had a conversation with Jordan Tinney, who was the superintendent in Surrey prior to that, several years back, and he showed me their kind of data machine that they have, and it is quite incredible. And I have said before to him, and I'll say again, that preparing for students, whether or not they have a designation, they have kind of all the data and statistics they need to do that. What they don't have probably is enough resources, or as the minister said, maybe also some considering of how they're going to use their resources to fulfill these issues, because they are not providing enough support to students, and that's pretty clear.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. I mean, to what extent are you seeing this related to a lack of educational assistance for that specialized support?
I think, educational assistance, and I got to say this carefully, they are so important. They are critical. And as parents, and I am also that parent, that's my costume today and every day, but it's really important to them that education assistants are there, because they're kind of that deep connection with the student. But teachers also need time to plan and prepare, to individualize the education for students, to set up the environment in such a way that it will work for kids. Surrey schools are cram-packed, and to the point where high schools have staggered schedules this year. There's no space for kids to self-regulate if they need a break. And so all of those things, I think, play into this, and it contributes to the challenge.
Well, again, there was a time in British Columbia when students with complex needs were essentially separated from most general classrooms. And then there was a shift to include students with some complex needs in the classrooms with some supports. I guess, what do you see as the benefits and the costs of each of these approaches?
I mean, there's lots of research out there that proves that inclusive education is better, not just for students with disabilities, but actually for all students, that their educational outcomes are better. So I think, that conversation is already done. But the issue is that because of austerity measures over so many years, 20 years, my kids have been in, they just finished school, but they started back in 1998, my first child, and I've seen the austerity measures that have kind of driven down the amount of support that is in schools. And there's also a drive for a better approach, because some of it is about the education of the people who are supporting kids in schools, both teachers and EAs and other staff as well, and understanding disabilities and what is going to work best.
Now, are you concerned at all about stigma against students with disabilities, if there are students or parents that feel like these incidents are disrupting their education?
I am concerned about it. And I think, again, that it comes back to being a systemic responsibility. I'm very concerned that kids will be labeled as violent, that, and I do have, I hear what the parents who sort of express a little concern are saying, that maybe, a big number is going to come out about how many room clears there were, and that's going to actually translate into those kids shouldn't be in classrooms with other kids. They should be segregated, which students are. The superintendent was talking about how this is happening in elementary classrooms primarily, I think I understood. And one of the reasons for that he didn't say, is that students are segregated if they have kind of more complex support needs when they reach high school.
I see. We keep hearing that the province is cash-strapped. How concerned are you about school funding and the impact on students with disabilities?
I'm very concerned. I mean, the funding has, districts have been cutting for 20 years, and they have had to cut because they are not getting the funding that they need to support the students that they have. And it's not just about students with disabilities. The amount of funding overall has not increased with inflation, has not kept up. And so that translates to cuts, and that translates to impacting kids.
It's really a pleasure to hear from you. Again, there's so many angles to this conversation, and yours is an important perspective to include. So, Tracy, we appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. And I hope people will also consider using the National Exclusion Tracker.
Okay.
Exclusions.
Thank you. That is Tracy Humphreys, Director of Operations with the Family Support Institute of BC. We've had a lot of emails about this topic all week, so if you'd like to share your perspective, feel free to send us an email on the coast at cbc.ca.